My 15-year-old daughter is caught in a nightmare, being blackmailed into giving up her baby for adoption. The shocking twist? The one doing the blackmailing is her own boyfriend, who deceived us about his age. He's actually 20. Despite this being legal in our country, it doesn't make the situation any less painful. Just yesterday, after my daughter broke the news of her pregnancy to him, he dumped her. She confided in me this afternoon, and we both shed a few tears. She was hesitant to discuss it at length, saying she needed some time, but right before I left for my night shift, I work from Sunday to Thursday, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. she dropped a bombshell: she wants to keep the baby. We couldn't delve into it because I was already running late for work, but we agreed to talk more tomorrow afternoon. Here's the problem: I can't afford another child. For the last 9 years, I've been raising my 2 daughters, including my youngest, who is just 11, all on my own. Their father is absent, a deadbeat who provides minimal child support. To put it into perspective, the costs for my daughter's school meals alone are 3 times what I receive in support. We live in a tiny apartment where my daughters share an 8-square-meter room while I sleep on the living room couch. Our life is a constant struggle, living paycheck to paycheck, and I often skip meals to make sure they have enough to eat. Public childcare options are overflowing, and private childcare is way out of my budget. If my daughter keeps the baby, someone has to be home for the first 3 years. Once the child is old enough, then they can attend kindergarten or preschool, but what then? A baby doesn't need much space, but a toddler or preschooler certainly does. I inherited this apartment, and with the housing crisis in Hungary, moving out is not an option for us. I know my daughter won't be able to afford living on her own with a preschooler. Despite my fears, I don't want to pressure her into having an abortion. I grew up Catholic, the 5th of 7 children, and I know all too well that faith doesn't always provide. My family was in and out of foster care, so I've seen the hardships up close, and I can't simply lean on the idea that God will take care of us. We're not US citizens, we live in a remote part of Hungary. Some comments I received brought up the question of how my daughter allowed her boyfriend to manipulate her into a physical relationship. To clarify, they attend the same school, but he's in his final year of technical studies while she's just starting out. They both lied to me about his grade. She didn't want to worry me. Someone mentioned that in Hungary, the age of consent is 14, which makes this situation even more disturbing. They suggested I find a therapist for my daughter, which sounds like a good idea. We might also consider family therapy for the difficult conversations ahead. I know that some benefits exist, and if she applies for state aid, the authorities could pursue her boyfriend for child support, which might help. It was also pointed out that pregnancy can sometimes result in a healthy compromise through open adoption. Regardless, the hard truth remains that I simply can't support another child, and while I want to be supportive of my daughter, I feel the weight of reality pressing down on me. In my initial panic, I received several unsolicited messages about adopting her baby. To me, using my child's crisis for personal gain is beyond wrong. I grew up in poverty, and counting on divine intervention feels naive at best. I'm an atheist now, but the fears and the anxieties of my upbringing haunt me. After posting my situation, I felt relieved to have shared my burdens. I had been terrified and overwhelmed, and expressing my fears was a release I desperately needed. I appreciate everyone who reached out with supportive words. That night, my daughter and I talked more about what transpired. It turned out that her ex-boyfriend pressured her into sleeping with him, refusing to use protection because he said it felt uncomfortable. She was so caught up in her emotions that she didn't even notice her period was late. Her cycle had only started last April, so when she told her best friend, they decided to take a pregnancy test last week, which, to her shock, came back positive. Today, I took her to the OB/GYN. After the doctor scolded her about the circumstances, he estimated that she was about 7 weeks along. Then came the ultrasound, where we learned there was no heartbeat, no viable pregnancy. The only issue was that the miscarriage hadn't started yet. We set up an appointment for a cleanup procedure on Friday. I felt a wave of relief, but it was bittersweet. I was worried about her emotional state, but surprisingly, she seemed relieved on the way home. She shed a few tears but insisted, "I'm okay, Mom." I promised her we'd discuss everything when she was ready. Then came the unexpected turn. Around 1 p.m., she received a call from her friend, but I answered. It was the friend's mom, and she began grilling me about why my daughter wasn't in school, if the baby was okay, and whether my daughter had discussed adoption. It was strange. The moment she realized she was talking to me, she clammed up. It felt suspicious, like there was more behind her worries than she was letting on. The moment I woke up from my nap, my daughter stood in front of me, tears streaming down her face. Between sobs, she confessed that when she took the pregnancy test, her friend had spilled the beans to her mom. That mom, in turn, had called her friend on the adoption waiting list, and before I knew it, 2 grown women had bullied my daughter into promising to give her baby up for adoption. They even made her watch The Silent Scream, a chilling documentary that I knew would traumatize her even further. My blood boiled at the thought of this, and all I could think about was how close I was to losing my grip on sanity. The only thing that kept my anger from spilling over into something worse was the law. I felt rage surging through me like an unstoppable tide. I couldn't help but reflect on the situation with her ex-boyfriend. I wished I had more details about him, anything to provide a shred of justification for my disdain. What kind of person impregnates a 15-year-old? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Sure, the age of consent here was 14, which is absurd, but this guy was 20. It was enough to make anyone's stomach turn. The thought of him made my skin crawl, and I didn't even want to entertain the idea of him being anything other than a scumbag. But, in a way, there was a small silver lining. Maybe it was for the best that they wouldn't have to care for another baby. I couldn't see how they'd manage it with everything else going on. Then there was the next story that came to mind, one that left me grappling with my own emotions. Am I the a-hole for being upset that my wife, whom I'm currently separated from, hadn't told me she was diagnosed with cancer? Growing up, my parents had been well off and hard workers, but they were neglectful. By the time I turned 10, they decided I didn't need a nanny anymore, and that's when I truly lost my parental figures. They were consumed by their careers, leaving little room for me in their lives. When I met my wife, she was a breath of fresh air, a vibrant, intelligent, and caring woman. She would give you the shirt off her back and would spend hours lost in conversation with me. But as time passed, that connection waned. She'd come home from work and, instead of engaging with me, crawl straight into bed, scrolling through TikTok for hours on end. It was heartbreaking to watch her slip away, disengaging from everything around her, even as she paid someone to do her chores. She always claimed she was too tired but could somehow stay up all night or sleep for 18 hours straight. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I felt as if I were reliving my childhood, stuck in a cycle of neglect. I asked for a separation, a decision that tore at my heart. She cried and begged me to reconsider, but I knew something had to change. We both understood that separations usually led to divorce, and deep down, I felt we were spiraling toward that inevitable end. Then, an old friend of hers reached out to me, furious. She unleashed a torrent of anger, informing me that my wife had cancer and questioning how I could abandon her during such a challenging time. I was blindsided. I had no idea about her diagnosis. When I confronted my wife, she explained that she hadn't told me because she didn't want to manipulate me into staying. I asked her how long she'd known, and she revealed it was just 3 weeks after our separation. I felt a mix of hurt and anger. How could she keep something like that from me? I had noticed her hair thinning and her overall frailty, but she brushed it off as stress. I was devastated. The truth was, she had looked ill for 3 years. I had done everything I could to help, making doctor's appointments, preparing meals, and trying to coax her out of bed. But she would refuse to go to the doctor, convinced there was nothing wrong. I had grown weary of it all. It felt as if she were shutting me out completely. I often found myself questioning whether I could have been more supportive or if I should have pushed her harder to seek help. Yet, deep down, I was frustrated. If we had known that her health was deteriorating, I would have reacted differently. I wish she had taken the initiative to go to the appointments I arranged before the separation. Even now, despite everything that had happened, I found myself wanting to support her. In the aftermath of this whirlwind of emotions, I scoured through online comments about my situation. One user chided me for being self-absorbed, while another accused me of neglecting my wife. I knew I had tried my best to support her, even dropping off meals when she was too exhausted to cook. I pondered whether I had overlooked something crucial in our relationship, failing to advocate for her when she needed me most. Despite all of this, I felt a longing to do whatever I could to help her now. It was a complicated mess, one that left me feeling trapped between my past and present, desperate to find a way forward. They took blood from her and sent it to the lab. She confided in me, saying she felt lazy and burnt out. I scheduled appointments with specialists, but she refused to attend, insisting that her original doctor had told her she didn't have depression, she was just lazy. Her blood tests came back normal. It was only after we separated that she finally sought medical help again. I called my wife to see if she wanted to talk. When I arrived at her place, I realized no one had visited her in weeks. Although she's typically very clean, it was clear she had been managing everything on her own. I felt a wave of regret wash over me and apologized for everything that had happened between us. I asked her why she hadn't told me about her cancer diagnosis. She admitted she felt guilty, fearing that if we went through all the effort of finding out what was wrong and it turned out to be nothing but her laziness, I would resent her. When we separated, she thought she could simply attend a few doctor appointments to prove she was physically fine. But it was during that process that she learned she actually had cancer. She was distraught, feeling guilty for not going to any of the appointments I had set up for her. Deep down, she knew I would have come back if I'd known the truth, but she didn't want me to sacrifice for her after she had dismissed my concerns for so long. As she sobbed, she shared how, even during school, she experienced these intense periods of extreme fatigue that left her unable to get out of bed. Her parents took her to the doctor, but they found nothing wrong. It wasn't anxiety or depression, she just felt physically drained. Her parents and the doctor had brushed it off as laziness, and it broke my heart to hear that. I told her, "That doesn't sound like laziness, it sounds like a serious medical issue. I want to help you figure this out." To me, it sounded like it could be an autoimmune disease or some kind of flare-up. I had always believed her, even when she insisted she was just being lazy. After 3 years of trying to get her to see a doctor, I would have believed her if she'd been honest with me from the start about her struggles as a child. As she continued to cry, I comforted her. After her tears subsided, I checked her fridge. There were only a few items left, including some frozen meals I had dropped off before. I offered to go grocery shopping or bring her to my apartment for a meal, and she chose my place. I packed up a few things for her, grabbed a basket of her dirty clothes to wash, and prepared a bath for her when we got to my apartment. I cooked dinner for us while she settled in, wearing a pair of my pajamas since she didn't have any clean ones. During dinner, she kept thanking me, and I reminded her that she didn't need to thank me for anything. "You're my wife, and of course I'll take care of you through this," I said. She expressed regret over how she used to handle everything before, not wanting to put that burden on me again. I reassured her that she was sick and tired and that I would take care of everything as long as she was honest with me about her feelings and didn't brush them off as laziness. After dinner, we cuddled on the couch, and she quickly fell asleep, looking more comfortable than she had in weeks. The next day, she was a bit clingy but seemed to find solace in my presence. It was clear she was more at ease. We talked about her possibly staying in my apartment, and I realized we'd have to figure out how to break her lease. I was determined not to divorce or abandon her, she needed my support now more than ever. Now, dear readers, I find myself pondering whether I'm in the wrong here. What do you think? Am I the bad guy? On one hand, I had tried to schedule appointments for her and was deeply affected by her earlier dismissal of my concerns. Yet, I can't help but think about how her childhood experiences shaped her perception of her health and my reactions. I wish I could say there's a clear answer, but the truth is this situation is complex. We both carry scars from our pasts, and it's challenging to navigate these waters without making assumptions or judgments about one another. And then there's my sister. She recently claimed she caught my girlfriend cheating with one of my friends. Both my girlfriend and my friend deny it. My girlfriend and I have been together for over 3 years, and things had been great until about 6 months ago when our intimacy dwindled. I admit, much of that was my fault. Work became stressful, and I was dealing with family issues that affected our relationship. We talked about it, and I promised to put more effort into rekindling our romance. Overall, I think we've made progress, but I know we still have work to do. Despite everything that's happened, I can't help but love this girl. I don't want to lose her. Just last night, my girlfriend mentioned she was heading to a club with some friends after work. I didn't think much of it, she and her friends do this from time to time, so I just shrugged it off. But around 11 p.m., my sister texted me, saying she'd seen my girlfriend and a mutual friend of ours making out at the club. At first, I didn't believe her. She said when she went to grab her phone to get proof, they had stopped but were still dancing closely, and she managed to snap a couple of pictures. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I asked my sister if they left together, but she didn't know. Here's the kicker, about 4 years ago, my sister had a huge crush on this same friend. She confessed her feelings to him, but he shot her down pretty hard, claiming she wasn't his type and that she was too young. He was pretty harsh about it, and it really hurt her. For a year, she could barely be in the same room with him. She's since moved on, but she still harbors some resentment. As far as I know, my sister has a decent rapport with my girlfriend. They aren't exactly friends, but they get along. This morning, I sent the pictures to my girlfriend and our friend, asking what the hell was going on. They both insisted that all they did was dance. I pointed out that they looked way too close, and it felt inappropriate. My girlfriend dismissed my concerns, saying I was just being paranoid. I shared what my sister had seen, and after some back and forth, my girlfriend said I had to choose who to believe, her or my sister. I told her I needed time to think about it. She rolled her eyes and said, "Whatever." In a moment of desperation, I messaged my friend privately, pleading with him to explain everything. His silence felt like guilt. I really didn't think my sister would lie, but a part of me wondered if she saw an opportunity to hurt him for what he did to her. Maybe I was just being naive. As an update, I figured I should let you know how things unfolded. Neither my girlfriend nor my friend texted me back, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have heard from them at all if I hadn't made it clear I just wanted the truth. They finally agreed to come over Monday night to explain everything. Here's the short version: they did go back to his place, and yes, they slept together. They claimed it was the first time, but 4 months ago, after my girlfriend and I had a particularly bad fight, which, by the way, I don't even remember, my friend noticed she was upset and took her out for lunch. They ended up talking about our relationship, and that's how they exchanged numbers. She texted him a couple of weeks later while I was out fishing with friends, and from that point on, they'd been texting daily and hanging out 2 or 3 times a week. My girlfriend went into detail about how I had pushed her away over the last 6 months. I thought we were improving after our talks, but she said things only got better for about 2 to 3 weeks before falling back into the same rut. I asked her why she didn't bring it up again, and she insisted she did. I told her that regardless, she should have just broken up with me instead of cheating. She admitted she messed up but claimed I was partly to blame too. I pressed her about whether it was just them sleeping together. They both said no. I also asked why they didn't just tell me the truth when I confronted them with the pictures, and they admitted they panicked. My friend, when prompted, said he was sorry for how everything went down but wasn't sorry it happened. I told him there are plenty of women he could have been with, regardless of my problems with my girlfriend. He had the nerve to say she hasn't been my girlfriend for 4 months. That comment hit me like a punch to the gut. I told them both to get out. Now, I'm at a loss for how I feel. I hated them when they walked in and when they left, but now the hatred is fading into confusion. Last night, I went to remove my girlfriend from social media, and I stumbled across a picture of them together on her Instagram. I couldn't help but skim through the comments, and it stung to see some people asking about me while others congratulated them, saying they looked cute together. That didn't feel good at all. I also reached out to my sister to apologize for throwing her under the bus. I hadn't realized I'd done that until I saw those comments. She reassured me that she didn't care if it meant uncovering the truth and getting those two out of my life. Honestly, I think I'll be single for a while. Some friends suggested therapy, and that might be something worth exploring down the line. To wrap it all up, I want to emphasize that I do not condone cheating. I've said it countless times, but it feels like there's more to unpack here. My friend and my girlfriend only connected after that huge fight between my girlfriend and me, a fight I don't even remember. He mentioned I was going through a tough time, and even though I tried to make things better, it's clear I still had a lot to work on. The conversation around relationships and boundaries often feels like navigating a minefield. Take, for instance, this story about a guy, let's call him Op, who finds himself grappling with the aftermath of a breakup. His girlfriend had made it clear that things were on thin ice for a while. Their relationship seemed fine for just 2 or 3 weeks, but that's a flimsy foundation. Now, while cheating is never the right answer, one can't ignore that sometimes, people find themselves pushed to the brink. They stray for reasons that go beyond simple betrayal. Now, let's talk about the friend in this scenario. What a jerk. Seriously, I can't help but wish that a piano would fall on him. He told Op that his girlfriend hadn't been his for the past 4 months. That makes you think, right? Maybe Op wasn't the partner he thought he was. We don't know the whole story, but it's a significant point to consider, especially after reading countless tales like this one. What's your take on it? Now, onto another story. This one revolves around a wedding that didn't go as planned. Picture this, my best friend from childhood got married last weekend. It was a beautiful day, and she had an unplugged wedding. That means no phones were allowed. I totally respected that decision, and honestly, I might even do the same for my future wedding. The entire morning was enchanting, and the ceremony? Unforgettable. But then the reception kicked off. My sister started calling me, and I initially ignored it. I had told my family not to contact me during the wedding because, well, no phones. But my sister didn't take the hint. She bombarded my phone with about 70 calls. At that point, I felt like I had to answer. My best friend is usually understanding, so I thought she'd be okay with it. When I finally picked up, my sister told me that my mom had been in an accident. Thankfully, she was okay, just a concussion. But I realized I had to go find my best friend and let her know I needed to leave. When I told her, she completely lost it. She yelled at me for being on my phone, claiming that I should have waited until after the wedding to handle it. I felt torn. Yes, it was her special day, but I had to go to the hospital. I left, not just because of her reaction but because my family needed me. Later, I got texts from her, cursing me out and saying it wasn't that hard to put my phone down. Some of our friends and even her husband joined in, calling me names. My family insists I wasn't in the wrong, but I still feel guilty. I don't want to lose a lifelong friend over this. She's practically a sister to me. For some context, I wasn't even a bridesmaid. She didn't have any. To clarify, I went to the parking lot to take the call. I tried the bathroom first, but it was occupied. The parking lot was empty. Also, this isn't the first time my friend has acted selfishly. There have been other instances where she wasn't very considerate, like the time I couldn't hang out because my sister was having a baby and wanted me there. My friend's honeymoon ends on Sunday, and I'll message her then. I'm seriously considering dropping the best from our best friend title. I don't want to lose her, but this situation has opened my eyes to other times when I should have distanced myself. I plan to talk to her when she returns from her honeymoon. I just don't want to disturb her vacation. Final update, I reached out to her yesterday, asking if we could talk. She told me she didn't want to meet face to face because she thought I might leave if something else happened with my family. I suggested a phone call instead, and she agreed. I explained everything from my perspective, but she still called me an a-hole and said I wouldn't be invited to future events. Her main issue? She felt I stole her spotlight on her big day, acting as if I planned for my mom to have an accident just to take attention away from her. I told her that her viewpoint was completely messed up and self-centered. This incident made me realize how toxic our friendship has become. I told her not to contact me anymore because we weren't friends anymore. When I asked who had told her I was on the phone, she admitted it was her mom. Honestly, her mom has never liked me and has always treated me poorly, so I wasn't surprised. This morning, her mom tried to reach out, but I told her to stop or I would involve the police. I've changed my number to prevent any further contact from her or her friends and family. Now, let's move on to a different tale. My boyfriend is moving in with his female best friend, and honestly, their closeness is making me uncomfortable. We've been together for nearly a year, and when we started dating, he introduced me to Faith, one of his closest friends. They've known each other since childhood and share a bond that I initially didn't mind because Faith had a boyfriend at the time. The way she acted around my boyfriend felt harmless. She treated him the same way she did with her other close male friends. But things took a turn just before Christmas when Faith and her boyfriend broke up. I never got the full story, but I knew it was a messy situation since they had been living together. Faith was in a tough spot, she needed a place to stay. My boyfriend offered his couch to her, and that's where my unease began. I expressed my discomfort about having another girl living at his place, and he brushed it off, insisting it was temporary and that Faith was his best friend. He reminded me that I had no say in who he chose to lend his couch to. Our argument escalated, but eventually, I caved in. On New Year's Eve, I wanted to return to his apartment after celebrating at a friend's place. He said Faith was there, and that we wouldn't be able to be intimate. Frustrated, I snapped back that she could listen to us if she wanted. This irritated him, and he flatly refused to entertain that idea. When I pressed him about when Faith would be moving out, he mentioned she was searching for a place but was struggling to find something within her budget. That night, I went home alone, feeling a mix of irritation and concern. A week later, he wasn't feeling well, so I decided to surprise him with some food. When I arrived at his apartment, Faith answered the door wearing a tank top and tiny pajama shorts. I couldn't help but ask if she walked around like that all the time, to which he casually confirmed. My annoyance grew, and he quickly picked up on it, telling me not to overreact. I challenged him by asking how he'd feel if I had a close male friend living with me who walked around half naked. He admitted he would be uncomfortable but insisted he trusted me not to do anything inappropriate. I reassured him that I trusted him, but this crossed a boundary for me. I asked again about Faith's plans to move out, and that's when he dropped a bombshell. He and Faith had decided to look for a place together once his lease ended in March. I lost it. Faith had overheard our argument and emerged from the shower in a towel, asking what was wrong. I told her I wasn't comfortable with the situation. She apologized but said I needed to find a way to accept it. He didn't say anything in response, which made my blood boil. When I pressed him further, he sighed and reiterated that she had been in his life longer than I had and that their arrangement was beneficial for both of them. I couldn't fathom how he could think this was okay. When I asked what would happen if we wanted to move in together before their lease was up, he said we could discuss it if and when the time came. That comment left me feeling incredibly angry and insulted. I stormed out and later texted him, asking him to think about what mattered more, living with her or our relationship. He shot back that it sounded like I was giving him an ultimatum, which I denied. I argued that he was being unreasonable, and although we continued texting, I sensed it might be the beginning of the end for us. I brought up my discomfort repeatedly, mentioning how close he was to Faith and how I felt like I was losing. My best friend pointed out that I'd lose every time because of their long-standing friendship, which made me even angrier. If he truly envisioned a future with me, shouldn't he be willing to fight for our relationship and help me feel secure? Comments from friends only made me more frustrated. One pointed out that since Faith was living there, it meant no intimacy between us. I had to agree, his small apartment made it impossible for us to have privacy. Someone suggested I just go back to my place, but I had to move back in with my mom due to financial struggles, and she had made it clear she wouldn't tolerate me sneaking around while she was home. I respected her wishes. Another friend commented on how, as a longtime girl best friend of a guy, she'd never speak to his girlfriend that way, which raised more questions about Faith's intentions. Then someone chimed in with the thought that Faith might be trying to assert her place in his life since she had been there longer. After a while, I decided to update everyone on my situation. I thanked everyone for their advice and support and shared that I had texted him, asking to pick up my things from his apartment the following Friday after work. He replied simply with, "Sure." When I arrived at his place, I texted him that I was in the parking lot and asked him to bring my stuff down. I was determined to avoid any confrontation with Faith, but as he brought my box of things downstairs, I couldn't hold back. In an awkward moment, I blurted out, "How long have you two been sleeping together?" He laughed it off, saying it didn't really matter anymore. I insisted it did because if he was seeing both of us, that changed everything. He reluctantly admitted that the night I left his place when he was sick was the first time he had slept with Faith since we got together. I didn't ask if they had been intimate before me, the way he answered suggested a history I couldn't ignore. As I left, I knew I had to reevaluate everything. The trust we had built felt shattered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. She needed to figure her life out because no woman wants to play second fiddle to someone else. I got into my car and drove away without waiting for him to respond or even looking back to gauge his reaction. It stung to know he cheated on me, even though, if I'm being honest, I had expected it on some level. Right now, I'm caught somewhere between anger and indifference. I've deleted and blocked both of them on every platform imaginable. I just want to move on from this mess. I know some people might say this is a lesson learned, but the only thing I've taken away from it is that the next guy I date better not have any sexual history with any of my female friends before we start a relationship. Seriously, I'm done with this nonsense. User 1 commented, "This sounds strange. Why now? They've known each other for so long. If they were hooking up before, why didn't they just become a couple? Honestly, I'm confused too. Are they out of their minds, or is it something else? It feels like there's some weird obsession between them, but for some reason, they won't date each other. And I don't buy for a second that they haven't been involved throughout our entire relationship. He's a cheater, and being a liar isn't much of a stretch." Another user chimed in, "You sound really calm. I'd be livid. I'd want to burn them. I get it. I cried all the way home and now I'm sitting in bed eating ice cream, handling it the best way I can. This situation feels so familiar. We recently had a story that was almost identical. When I saw the title, I thought, didn't we read this already? But no, it's just another instance where the woman and her boyfriend are lifelong friends with this other girl. The boyfriend and his female best friend are way too close for comfort, and something definitely isn't right. I'm sorry, but what's up with this stuff? It's codependency on a level that's just too much. I can't handle that kind of relationship. You all can dissect this one because it's exhausting. I felt her anger, and now I want ice cream too. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to assume you did since you made it to the end. We did it, folks. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.